yeah, gotta collect, gotta catch 'em all, brother. Ooh, yeah.
Hell is frozen over, pigs are flying, Ash has become a competent Pokemon trainer, and Shreddy has changed his mind about modern Pokemon cards. One of those statements is true, and it definitely ain't that Ash is competent. But in today's video, I want to talk about why I'm changing my mind on modern Pokemon cards. Now, for some of you guys, this might seem like a massive culture shock from the things that I normally talk about or the things that I usually like within Pokemon cards. But in all honesty, if you follow me on Instagram or if you've ever spoken to me, you'll see this isn't a massive difference, or if you watch some of my investment Pokemon videos, you know that this isn't a huge change. But basically, in today's video, I want to talk about why I am changing my mind on modern, and why I'm up a little bit to modern, and why I'm becoming a little bit more invested in modern. When I say invested, I mean both money-wise invested, but also just as a collector and somebody wanting to have fun within the hobby. So in today's video, I want to cover modern Pokemon and where my mind is changing, or where my opinions are changing a little bit when it comes to Pokemon flipping, Pokemon investing, Pokemon card collecting, and mega punching that thumbs up button, because hitting that like button literally takes 2 seconds to do and massively helps YouTube push this video out to other Pokemon card collectors, Pokemon fans, so more people get to see this guy and hopefully learn a little bit about the market, maybe how to save a little bit of money, and maybe how to grow their collection. So let's get ready, Shreddy, and go into today's video where I'm talking about the Brecken Shred lines and how I'm changing my opinion on modern Pokemon.
Are you ready for Shreddy?
So thanks for watching today, guys, and right off the bat I want to kind of start off by saying that I've never outright once said that modern Pokemon card collecting is... I've kind of expressed some of my opinions towards, I'm not a huge fan of modern Pokemon, and that's just me personally because I have such a strong connection with Pokemon Gen 1, Gen 2. For me, Pokemon, the reason I like it so much is because it was a huge part of my childhood, and growing up, it's one of those franchises that I've never really strayed too far from. I grew out of it for like a year and a half maybe, if that, when I was a kid. But even then, as a teenager, I got back into it, and Pokemon's kind of been a part of my life, whether it's been playing the games, watching the anime, collecting the cards, whatever aspect of the hobby it's been. Vintage Pokemon is like Shreddy bending over, pulling his pants down, getting that buttocks cheek out, and just having that 50cc of nostalgia injected straight up Shreddies.
Japan.
So one of the big reasons that I've kind of steered away from modern Pokemon is because if you're spending money to buy a booster pack, a booster box, whatever it is, and you're pulling cards of Pokemon that you're not too familiar with, or if the name wasn't printed on the card, you wouldn't be able to name, it's just kind of hard to be spending £4 a pop on a pack, $100+ £100+ on a booster box to open cards of Pokemon and characters that you really don't care much about. However, when it comes to something like a Hidden Fate, which is a modern set that I actually absolutely loved, it's a completely different ball game, because the majority of that set for me appealed to me because it had Gen 1 Pokemon in, all Pokemon that I knew, with that chance of the shiny Volt card, which yeah, it might be a Pokemon that I don't know, or it might be a Pokemon that I'm kind of not really a fan of, but at least there's a bunch of other cards there that I can relate to, characters I can relate to, characters I'm familiar with, and you can get that cool shiny looking card, the full art card. So if it's a Pokemon that you're not a massive fan of, or a Pokemon that you're not too familiar with, chances are you're going to have a sick looking card there. Whether it's the games, playing Sword and Shield, it's nice to have that blend of new Pokemon with those kind of familiar classics to kind of help guide you through. So overall, what I'm trying to say is, for me, Pokemon is a huge kind of nostalgia trip, and that's why I enjoy Pokemon as much as what I do. When it comes to cards, it's all about that nostalgia for me, or has been up until I'd probably say last year. Even when I got back into collecting all the way back in 2008, I'd had no interest really in actually buying what was considered modern at the time. Now, I was collecting for a number of years then. I remember when the Heart Gold Soul Silver games came out, was super psyched, super pumped up to be playing them. Got them on the DS. Probably the best Pokemon games in the entire Pokemon franchise, the Heart Gold Soul Silver remakes. I remember the cards that were coming at the same time, and I was like this close to just going balls deep and getting a bunch of boxes to open. But there was just something that really, I don't know, it was something that, even though it was these Pokemon I was familiar with, I wasn't too bothered about buying the cards because it was like, there's no nostalgia there, so I'm not collecting this. But that's slowly starting to change, because collecting now, for me, is not purely about the nostalgia. Don't get me wrong, the majority of my collection, or the reason I enjoy collecting Pokemon specifically, is nostalgia. But being more involved in the community, both on YouTube and on Instagram, I'm being introduced and exposed to, you know, a lot of other people. I'm speaking to more people. I'm speaking to a lot of people in the community. So I'm just like a lot more exposed to the hobby because of that engagement I'm having with other collectors. And as much as I could literally sit and talk old school Pokemon, vintage Pokemon with anyone, any day of the week, there's only so much you can talk about when it comes to base set, jungle, fossil, gym heroes, Team Rocket, gym challenge, the Neo sets. There's like, if you look at Pokemon, vintage Pokemon, WotC, that's from like 1999 up to about 2003. Pokemon has been around now for what, 25 years in terms of the UK release, or the English print release, 22 years. So if I'm only ever looking back at that 2-3 year period, possibly 4 year period of Pokemon, I'm missing out on so much that the franchise has to offer. Now, my attitude isn't the same to games. I've played every single mainline Pokemon game. The only ones I haven't finished is Sun and Moon, but I've played every single mainline Pokemon game. Kind of say I've stayed up to date with the anime. I don't really watch it, but I kind of, you know, I've heard what goes on and things like that in the more modern episodes and series. When it comes to the cards, because the card collecting was such a big part of my childhood, for some reason I've always just been drawn back to collecting purely the nostalgia, only what I had when I was a kid, and just getting that sweet kick of nostalgia every time. But ranting aside, rambling aside, let's break down exactly why and where I'm changing my opinion when it comes to modern Pokemon card collecting. Okay, so when it comes to flipping Pokemon, or Pokemon flippers,
Yeah, sweet money. Ooh, yeah.
in honesty, you know, nothing has changed. My perception of modern, my opinion of modern Pokemon, when it comes to flipping, was the same last year, it was the same the year before. It was the same when I was collecting myself, you know, going years back. Modern Pokemon is absolutely ideal for flipping. Now, whether you want to call flipping, whether you want to call it scalping, it's essentially buying something at a certain price, selling it relatively quickly, and making a profit on it. We're seeing that a ton at the minute because of stock shortages on sealed modern product. Literally, it's almost impossible in the UK to walk into a supermarket, because all of the shops are closed to the lockdown. But to walk into a supermarket right now and find anything on the shelves is really hard to do, because people are just buying up the Pokemon product, selling it online, selling it on Facebook, selling it on eBay to make a profit. They're flipping it, they're scalping it, however you want to call it. Modern Pokemon at the minute, because it is so hot. It's not just white hot, it's not just red hot, it's the kind of hot where you get that sizzling, fajita, spicy heat. Ow! And because of how popular modern Pokemon is, it makes it ideal for flippers. Now, the premise of flipping is very easy to do, but the practicality of it is where things get a little bit trickier. If you can have supply of modern Pokemon, you're absolutely laughing. But that's where the problem lies. It's hard to find the supply. Now, there's scalping bot set up, there's scalping group set up, dedicated around just basically finding what's coming in stock, when it's coming in stock, and being able to snipe those buys straight away, buying as much as you can to be able to sell it on. If you're one of those people, you're absolutely laughing with modern Pokemon. It's literally money for doing very little efforts. So when it comes to modern, if you're looking to make money and if you're looking to flip Pokemon cards, modern is absolutely ideal right now. Now, that's not to say we're living in a perfect world here and that's always going to be the case. It's only ideal right now because Pokemon is so popular. But that's not an issue for flippers, because if you're a flipper, you literally just want to get the product and you want to move it on as quickly as possible. Buying it, you know, the same day you've bought it, trying to sell it, or actually selling it the same day, is ideal. That's doable because Pokemon is so popular right now. after the 25th, celebration has died down, and after all the events this year have taken place, once the world goes back to normal, people, not locked down anymore, they're out on holidays, they're out on a weekend drinking, they're out in restaurants, they're out hanging out with friends, they're spending the money elsewhere. It's hard to tell right now if Pokemon's going to maintain that popularity. In all honesty, I think it won't, and I think we're kind of in a very hot, not a bubble, but we're in a very hot boom period that will kind of die down a little bit. We'll have a bit of a lull for a few years, and it'll pick back up. It's cyclical in nature, and it's why I always say peaks and troughs. Pokemon popularity or Pokemon prices, could even do it this way to get the bicep in. If it's going to be going up like this, prices now, prices 20 years from now, 50 years from now. But along the way, ups and downs, as I've always said on this channel. Same goes for popularity, demand, etc, etc. Now, on the topic of flipping, I'm thinking of doing, well, I'm thinking about it. I want to do a video talking about if you should flip Pokemon or if you should invest Pokemon. And I don't want to do this from a hypothetical situation. I want to do this from my own experiences of flipping Pokemon back in that 2008 onwards period when I had barely any money. I was a student and I was looking to grow my collection, and I was able to do so through flipping Pokemon. I have items that I bought last year, held on to, haven't sold them yet, and the price that those have risen has been quite considerable. And if I was to sell any of those pieces now, I would be in quite a good amount of profit. I also have friends who flip Pokemon, and they're doing it, day in, day out, getting that money coming in. But if they'd spent the exact same amount of money when they started flipping, held on to their items, they would be able to make just as much money selling it now, like 10 months later, not quite a year later, as what they do flipping every day. Flipping and investing are two completely different processes, but the end goal is to make money. But I want to do a video talking about if you should flip or if you should invest for the long term, using my experiences of items that I sold for back 10, 12 years ago, made very small profits on, whereas if I held them and sold them in 2020 or 2021, I would have made on single items tens of thousands of pounds. Let me know if you would like to see that video with some of the specific examples of things that I used to buy and sell and what they would be worth now, and I can kind of look back in hindsight to say, okay, if I was to go over and have a redo, would I have flipped back then, or would I have just bought for long-term investments? I can break down when you need to flip or why you need to flip to raise that capital or keep that cash flow going, and kind of give some advice about the things you should be looking to do and use those profits and how you can turn those profits into long-term investments. And that'll be me speaking from experience and me being quite candid and highlighting the mistakes I've made and some of the successes that I've had. If you are interested in that kind of video, guys, please do mega punch that thumbs up button. Let me know down in the comments below if you want to see it, and make sure to subscribe to see future videos like that.
Moving on to investments. Ooh yeah, investment for the long term, brother. Get that sweet, sweet money. Get that sweet, sweet chilling money coming in. Ooh yeah.
This is where I've changed my opinion on Pokemon, modern Pokemon, probably the most when it comes to the investment side. I've got videos on the channel, you can go and check them out. Just hit the channel, go into the search box, or click, just scroll through the feed, and you'll see all the videos from me where I'm talking about why vintage Pokemon is a better investment than modern Pokemon, where I'm comparing old cards versus new cards, what's better for investment. My opinion still hasn't changed, and I believe that vintage Pokemon is, if you had to categorize vintage and modern, I would say vintage has had returns that modern is likely not to see. And I still think investing in vintage now, if with the plan to sell in 20, 25 years time, is going to yield you better returns than what investing in modern product would be. However, there's always going to be exceptions in that, because there's going to be specific modern items that will outperform specific vintage items. But if I was to categorize the two as a whole, as I can only invest in what see vintage cards or modern Pokemon cards, I still genuinely believe that vintage is the way to go. However, modern Pokemon, and I've said this before, it is investable, it is viable. It's a little bit more risky for a number of reasons, and you're probably not going to see the same returns. I still have those beliefs. However, I am much more open now to investing in modern product than what I was this time last year. And that's not to say this time last year I was wrong. Maybe I was wrong, but it's just a change in my opinion and a change in my beliefs. And it's important for me to kind of recognise that, and rather than being stubborn and saying, vintage Pokemon is the best, Gen 1 and Gen 2 is the best, base set's the best, blah, 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 blah. It's important for me to realise, okay, there is an opportunity here, and we can potentially take advantage of that opportunity for investment purposes. So what do I mean by that? Hidden Fates, massively popular sets. Now, I still believe that people are hoarding cases and palletfuls of ETBs and Hidden Fates tins and collection boxes. So this time 20 years from now, there's going to be a load of sealed product out there still. However, I have maybe underestimated how much demand or how popular Pokemon is. I've said a few times on the channel that I believe that modern Pokemon is more popular among adults than kids, and I still do kind of believe that. But whether that's the case or not, I still think, I'm coming around to the belief now that, you know, modern Pokemon, and it's maybe due to some of the price increases we've seen of other modern sets which are now becoming older, I do see, I don't know if more potential is the right word, but I would probably feel a little bit more comfortable investing in modern Pokemon than what I did maybe a year ago. And I think part of the reason for that is because I've been more engaged with modern Pokemon predominantly because of my activity through YouTube and through Instagram. Engaging with the modern collectors and being exposed to modern sets through content on Instagram and through YouTube is allowing me to see, some of these arts look really cool. Some of these newer sets and these newer Pokemon cards, if I was a 10-year-old kid seeing these art, my Shreddy's little head would explode. He'd have a bloody shred ache from how awesome these cards are. So because I'm, more involved with modern Pokemon now, it always helps to be engaged in whatever it is you're going to be investing in. So because I'm engaged as a fan, I can see it, from a fan's perspective. People are going crazy for some of this modern stuff. And while I'm not the biggest modern collector or the biggest modern fan for the reasons I've already explained, as a marketer, I cannot ignore the demand that's out there, and I cannot ignore the needs, wants of other target markets, even if they differ to myself. But wait, this isn't me saying go and get a credit card and max it out buying modern Pokemon. Not that at all. There is some precautions that I want to make you guys aware of. Modern Pokemon is so widely distributed and so mass produced. Just go and check out the population reports of modern PSA cards compared to the vintage cards. There is so much more supply out there right now, and the reason we're seeing crazy prices on a lot of the stuff is because the demand is currently meeting it. Once Pokemon goes back down into that lull period or it cools off, which I'm predicting will be next year, I think you're going to see, not just for modern, but the entire market will kind of retrace a little bit. The entire market will cool off and prices will drop. When it comes to modern Pokemon, you've also got to factor in the possible nature of reprints. Now, I actually did a video just last week which looked at an announcement from the Pokemon Company to say that they're open production of future sets, and they're also reprinting sets that have been made, that have been hard to find and hard for collectors to get hold of. As of now, they haven't said what those reprints are going to be. People have been making speculations. I made my own speculations in a separate video, which got downvoted to hell because people didn't like some of the speculations I was coming out with. But, until we get confirmation, we don't know what we're going to get. It potentially could be Evolutions. I am not saying that has been confirmed. What I'm saying is it could be a reprint of Evolutions. If we see a reprint of a set like Evolutions, that means the gains that booster box has made in terms of a price climb, going up to like $1,000+. If a reprint is confirmed, that $1,000 box becomes back to a $100 box, maybe just over. It goes back to RRP. Now, I'm not saying Evolutions is being reprinted here, guys. I am just saying that when it comes to modern Pokemon, and Pokemon has announced that they are reprinting sets that have been hard to get hold of, what I'm saying is, as soon as those reprints hit, any kind of short-term gains that have been made on a product, As soon as reprints hit, that just goes back down to RRP. With more and more stock being allocated, or more and more cards being printed, more and more in circulation, it means that the cards aren't going to be as scarce in 20 years time. So if the cards aren't scarce, cards aren't rare, they're not going to be as valuable as something like the vintage WotC first edition cards, for example. But we've seen with cards such as a base set Charizard, even in PSA 9, we've seen it with Evolutions. It doesn't really matter how much supply is out there. If demand is there, those prices are going to boom. So when it comes to modern, I am a little bit more open to investing, but I just want to make you guys aware of some of the things that could have a knock-on effect for the shorter term investment prices and the longer term prices. One of those is reprints. One of those is if the buzz around Pokemon that we've got now kind of cools off, which eventually it will, cyclical remember, then the prices will start to kind of drop back down a little bit, so just be careful of that. But another reason why I also see modern as an investment is because, and I've already mentioned this going back to the Heart Gold Soul Silver sets, is what's modern now will eventually become old. So whether it's in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, when card sets go out of print, they inevitably raise in value because they're not being produced anymore. How much they raise in value depends on how popular the set was, how successful the set was, how much demand for the set there is, and how much supply of the set that there is. That's why when you see these, Japanese exclusive promos coming out for, I don't know, the 20th anniversary, the Team Rocket case, for example, very limited supply, cool piece, rare, scarce, demand, that's what caused the prices to go up. But all of these sets that we're getting now, in 10, 15, 20 years time, will hopefully be out of print. Pokemon won't keep reprinting them. In all honesty, they will be out of print in like 20 years time. And as they become out of print and as they get older, it's just natural that, when collectibles stop being made, the older they get, they go up in value. But like I say, how much they go up in value depends on those factors that I've just mentioned. So certain sets, such as Hidden Fates, because of the demand around that set, even though there's going to be, huge amounts of sealed product out there in 10, 15, 20 years time, guys, there's going to be no shortage of sealed product whatsoever. The prices will go up, but probably not as much as, well, I'm not saying probably, definitely not as much as what vintage booster boxes have gone up, for example. But I can now accept, and I've got my head round, there's so much demand around modern that as these sets are going out of print, younger kids, teenagers now who are growing up on this stuff, in 20 years time, this might be their version of a base set. This is what, they're nostalgic for. This is what they want to go back to relive their childhood memories. So there will be a demand there for some of these more popular products, especially around this time with Pokemon being, in the buzz and in the, I don't want to say bubble, but this boom period that we are in.
And last but not least, brother, the collector. Gotta collect, gotta catch 'em all, brother. Ooh, yeah.
Genuinely, what got me into Pokemon when I was a kid, what got most people into Pokemon at some point, is just the collector nature of it. And collecting is, about just having fun, collecting what you like, collecting what you enjoy, wanting to buy the packs, wanting to open the packs, wanting to collect sets, wanting to collect specific cards. A collection can be whatever you make it. From a collector's point of view, this is where I am massively changing my opinion on modern. This time, a year ago, I had no interest in opening modern packs for the reasons I've already mentioned. The nostalgia, not being familiar with the Pokemon, having those strong connections to, what I grew up with and only being interested in those older cards. Fast forward to, 2021. Modern Pokemon, if you want that thrill, that excitement of chasing after cards, opening packs, taking that little bit of a risk, that little bit of a gamble, that little bit of a something, modern Pokemon is class. For me personally, the reason I've changed my mind and why I am now more open to collecting some modern Pokemon is because I have literally zero, and I can't stress this enough, I have zero desire to open vintage WotC product. The reason is I was lucky enough as a kid to be able to open tons and tons and tons of packs. Even though I could only get between 1 and 2 packs a week, then I would get stuff for birthdays, etc, etc. I used to spend so much money on Pokemon cards as a kid. I got my fill of opening them when I was a kid, pretty much. When I was a student and I got back into collecting, I got back into buying cards, opening cards. I was doing box breaks on YouTube back in 2008. I got my fill of opening product again back in that time period. I have got pretty much every raw card that I would want from the WotC era. So for me, even when I was collecting back in like, you know, that as a student 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I remember buying a Legendary Collection box, buying 2 of them with the sole intent to open both of those boxes to collect as much of a master set as I could and then buy the remaining in singles. Well, between me ordering 2 booster boxes, I was able to pick up 2 entire sets and a reverse holo set before the boxes even got delivered to me. So what happened? I had 3 complete sets, 2 booster boxes. I sold the booster boxes on, or I did a box break on one. I think I sold one of the Legendary Collection boxes on. Going back to what I mentioned earlier about flipping and investing, this is one of those times where if I didn't flip, if I invested,
Shreddy had that sweet, sweet money now. Oh yeah.
But we live and we learn. If you want to see that, if you want to learn from my mistakes, then let me know down in the comments below and I will make that video. So if I actually want to open packs, well, I can go and pay hundreds of pounds for a single booster pack to open, which is a very big gamble to say that you're actually going to get your money's worth back. If you go and buy a jungle or a fossil pack, you can go and buy raw, you know, holo cards from jungle and fossil for like 20 quid-ish. You can go and buy a booster pack for 200 plus. It just, yeah, there's more chance you're going to get a PSA 10. That's what you're opening these packs for now, to get, hopefully get PSA 10s. But honestly, it's just a big gamble and a big risk to take that probably more often than not isn't going to pay off. I have zero desire to pay that much money to open those older cards. If I want that excitement or that thrill of opening cards, you can do it with Modern, and Evolutions was a great set for that. Hidden Fates, again, another great example of a set you can do that with. Right now, those prices are a little bit more expensive because you can't get them at retail, but that's still cheaper than if you were going and buying those vintage cards. So for me personally, if I'm looking to open packs, which to be honest, I'm not even massively, you know, I don't really get much of a desire to open cards, to open booster packs. My opening videos tend to not do great in views compared to just talking videos like this one. So for me, I'm not even that big on opening packs, but if I do want to open some, I can just do it with Modern. I can pay, what, £4 a pack, or buy a booster box or a tin or an ETB, whatever it might be, and you can still get that bit of, you know, that bit of fun from opening packs. Another reason why I'm kind of warming to modern Pokemon is honestly, there's only so much you can collect when if I'm only focused on a 2 or 3 year period of the hobby, when the hobby spans for 20 plus years, there's only so much I can collect from that time period. Now, yes, it is my personal favourite time period, it's the golden era of the hobby, but you know, after you've seen a base set so many times, a jungle set so many times, a fossil so many times, a rockets, etc., even promos from back then, you know, it's just nice to open your horizons and actually expand into something new a little bit. Now, the problem there is because I'm really only familiar with Gen 1 and Gen 2, so it's finding the cards in the newer sets that have that same connection. I can have that fun opening, but through playing, you know, Sword and Shield, played that through last year, you get familiar with some of the Pokemon, so it's kind of like, okay, if I'm buying a newer set, as long as there's a sprinkle in there of old Pokemon I can connect with some of the newer Pokemon that I can recognise from the newer games, then it's, you know, it just makes it a lot more fun. The artwork on modern cards as well, full arts, some of these, you know, there's a Snorlax, I can't remember what set it's from, but it's like a VMAX or Gigantamax Snorlax where his stomach is like, it looks like a planet, it looks like King Kai's planet, is what it reminds me of from Dragon Ball Z. That artwork is just absolutely class. There's a Lugia from Legendary Pulse or Heartbeat, the Japanese set, that I pulled. It looks absolutely sick. And being able to open cards and just enjoy the art is what collecting's about. You can set goals, you know, with modern sets of, okay, I want to collect only Charizards, only Lugias, or only Shining Pokemon. I want to get the Master Set of every set that comes out. There's so much you can do when it comes to modern collecting, and, you know, a lot of the sets now are getting bigger and bigger, so a lot of people I've noticed don't really go for Master Sets, they just go for specific cards, and that's probably the approach I take with modern Pokemon. There's certain cards that I like the look of, the certain art I like, and I just want to add those specific cards to my collection. But modern Pokemon, for just that pure, you know, fun and that pure collection side, you know, it's absolutely great. Now, a downside on the flip side of that to having all this amazing art is when you're pulling a card that is absolutely worthless in Modern. And this is a double-edged sword, and it has its benefits and its cons. Because if you're opening, you know, if you're pulling a card and it looks sick and you're buzzing with it, but then you see the value of it is like less than the pack you bought it for, there's two ways to take that. One, I could have just bought the card singular and, you know, saved, you know, I could have bought the card for maybe £2 or $2 instead of paying £4 or $4 for the pack. So there's that aspect to look at it. But because some of these cards are kind of, the cards that do look cool, your regular holos in a lot of sets now are just bulk, they're considered bulk. Irregular V cards, not the V Max or the Full Art, just a regular Pokemon V card is, you know, sometimes not worth any money at all, or worth very little money, sometimes not even the price of the pack. Because they don't have value, you can kind of overlook that side of the hobby and you can just appreciate them for what they are. You can appreciate the artwork, the cards, the characters, and just really enjoy that side of it. It also makes buying single cards a lot cheaper to add to your collection. Outside of most, you know, outside of 2 or 3 cards in most Modern sets, there's not a great deal of cards that are worth a ton of money outside maybe something like a Hidden Fates. And this also brings me on to another good point of, should you be opening packs or should you be buying singles? And again, this is another video I want to make, so if you want to learn from Shreddy's experiences of collecting and flipping and investing and growing his collection, then please do let me know down in the comments below, because I strongly believe that the best way to grow your collection is to never open a single booster pack and to only buy single cards and job lot cards. And that might sound crazy because I've just been talking about how fun it is to open packs, but if your goal is to collect for cheap on a budget and collect specific sets or specific cards, if you want to see me talking about why I would strongly advise you never open booster packs and how you can buy singles, or how buying singles and job lots of cards and bundles is a much better and a much more efficient way to grow your collection, please do let me know. Mega punch that thumbs up button and I'll make that video for you guys. So in summary, Modern Pokemon, like I've always said since I've, you know, been posting Pokemon on this channel, there is chance to make money in Modern Pokemon, but for me as a collector and, you know, for the fun and for investment, Modern wouldn't be the way that I would normally go. For flipping, I've always said it's a great opportunity, and it's, you know, it's probably the easiest way to make, you know, quick money and, you know, shorter money, smaller amounts of money, quick money through flipping. But I am much more open now to investing in Modern Pokemon and actually just collecting for fun with Modern Pokemon, and not writing offers, oh, it's not as good as Vintage. Yes, it's not, in all honesty, I don't think it is anywhere near as good as Vintage. However, I'm going to say that because I have such a strong connection to Vintage. There's still a load of sick cards, sick art in Modern Pokemon that can make it a lot of fun. I do not think that the returns from investing in Modern will be as strong as what investing in Vintage 20 years ago and trying to sell it now would be. And I don't think that investing in Modern today compared to investing in Vintage today will yield as good results. However, I could be wrong, because who knows what's going to happen in 20 years time. But I do think that, you know, as someone who has been collecting since I was 8 years old, for, you know, the majority of my life I've been involved in Pokemon, it's time to open my horizons a little bit more than that 2 or 3 year gap in the hobby and actually enjoy Modern for what it is. It's because I don't think something that's produced today is as good as the stuff that I grew up with, doesn't mean that I can't enjoy the stuff that is being produced today. Give me Gen 1, Gen 2, Modern treatment, and Shreddy is all over that, even if it's not a Charizard. This video went on a lot longer than what I expected it to be, guys. I hope that if you've stuck with it this long, you've enjoyed it. If you have, then please do hit that thumbs up button. It literally takes you 2 seconds to do, but will tell YouTube that you've enjoyed the video and will push the video out to way more Pokemon fans out there. Drop in a comment down in the video below and let me know if you're a fan of Vintage, a fan of Modern, or a fan of both. Will also help the video out and gives me an opportunity to chat to you. On screen now is a video about how you can collect for cheap and on a budget, and be sure to go and check out all my other videos and hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode of the Pokemon Card Classic with the jacked, stacked serial thriller of Pokemon card collecting, Shreddy. But until next time, remember that collecting ain't no gimmick, it's a lifestyle.